Because of the pandemic, the loneliness people experience is a reality.
Agreed. And so we must reach out to people to help them alleviate their loneliness.
The American Religious Town Hall is now in session.
Welcome, friends, to the American Religious Town Hall meeting, where the discussion of religious, political, and social issues is meant to promote the cause of religious freedom and to help us better understand each other. And now, here's your host and moderator, Pastor Jerry Lutz.
I'm James Weingartner, sitting in for Jerry Lutz during another COVID edition of the American Religious Town Hall. We have fewer panelists and a little more spread out for this season of time. And we'd like to introduce to you our panelists today. We'll let them introduce themselves, and we'll begin with Michael.
I'm Bishop Michael Olson, and I am the Bishop of the Roman Catholic Diocese of Fort Worth, Texas.
I'm Rabbi Dan Levin. I serve as Senior Rabbi at Temple Bethel in Boca Raton, Florida.
My name is Canon John Peterson. I am an Episcopal priest canonically resident in the Diocese of Washington, D.C.
Hi, I'm Tony Matthews, and I'm the Senior Pastor at North Garland Baptist Fellowship in Garland, Texas.
One of the feelings that millions of us are experiencing during the COVID-19 pandemic is loneliness. Loneliness can lead to depression, produces stress, leads to obesity, inflammation, heart disease, dementia. Before the pandemic, the extended family system had given way to working longer for greater economic privileges, less time spent with family and friends, and less time enjoying what one has. Then COVID-19 struck. Many of the activities we once shared are no longer available. Computers and social media have become a two-edged sword. Former U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, quoted the Harvard magazine, wrote, "Modern progress makes it easier for us to technically connect, but often these advances create challenges that make us feel more alone and disconnected." The reality today is how we live has been dramatically changed because of the pandemic. Many public schools are closed. Teachers are at home teaching on Zoom. Most offices are closed and staff telework from home. Many churches, synagogues, and mosques are closed with little or no in-person activities, and worship is done online. People feel isolated. With nothing else to do, people stare at their computers or look at their televisions for hours, and we feel alone. We feel lonely. We feel disconnected as we're isolated from our family and friends for our own safety. We're waiting for the day when a simple greeting, a handshake, or hug will no longer be dangerous. Today, I'd like our panelists to respond to these three questions. One, how have you and your communities dealt with loneliness during the pandemic? Two, do you see loneliness during the COVID pandemic as a community issue, or do you think it's only a personal issue with personal levels of need? And three, how do you suggest to your parishioners or students that they stay grounded and sane when there's such an isolation and necessary distancing? It's an important and interesting subject, and we're looking forward to hearing the comments, and we're beginning today with Tony Matthews.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator, and to our colleagues. It's a blessing to be here, and this is a very important topic. I want to start with a definition of loneliness and lonely that I saw, and this is very pointed. It says, being alone and being lonely are two different things. One can be alone without being lonely, and one can be lonely in a crowded room. Loneliness is therefore a state of mind and emotion brought on by feelings of separation from other human beings. I thought that was a very pointed, insightful definition. And you know, we're made in the image of God. Human beings are made in the image of God, and one aspect of that, as I understand it, is that we're created to connect. We are in relationships with each other, with our God and with one another. And the pandemic certainly has exposed and exasperated, in a sense, our loneliness. I wouldn't be surprised if each one of us experienced loneliness at some point in time during the pandemic. As you mentioned in your statement, the isolation, the separation from families. Some of us have not seen our relatives in a long time. And so I think it's very, very crucial. As a church family, I know our church, we met for maybe 5 weeks out of, this was last March, so we're going on a year, and we met just 5 weeks out of that entire nearly 12 months. And I think gathering, connecting is so crucial. And when we have people at home who are ill and they are lonely, when, as I mentioned, people isolated from their family members, I think most people are just about zoomed out. You know what I'm saying? The Zoom meetings were very good, but I think at some point, we just need that connection. And I think the loneliness factor is real. The Apostle Paul, in 2 Timothy, he writes something. He talks about bringing the books. He tells mentions to bring the books and to bring Mark to see him. David in Psalm 25:16. He talks about how he was lonely. He says, "Turn to me and be gracious to me, for I am lonely and afflicted." In Psalm 25. So loneliness is a real thing, and we have to do something to address it. One of the things our church has done, because people are depressed, people have anxiety, and so one of the things, and as a pastor, it just aches me that I'm not able to assist in all ways and to delegate responsibilities because we're isolated. So one of the things we did is we connected with a Christian counseling agency, so that, and we partnered with a professional counselor to connect weekly with members who are feeling lonely, depression, anxiety, all the byproducts of loneliness, or some of the contributors to loneliness. And that seems to be going very well. And I think being able to talk by phone, of course, my niece up in Buffalo, New York, she got me on this Google something where you can actually see each other on the phone. It's kind of like FaceTiming, but it's another program. And I think these things are very important. But we're created to connect, and we got to get back to that, because I think, I'm reading about suicide rates among our young people, and because of depression, and all this is because of loneliness in part. So we have to just do whatever we can to keep people connected.
Thanks, Dan.
So I think, Tony, you highlight the pandemic of loneliness that I think so many people, and it goes in so many different ways. You see it among teenagers and adolescents who aren't socializing the way they normally would be socializing. You see it among young adults who aren't experiencing college the way they might normally have, or the beginnings of their careers. I know my own son moved out to Santa Fe, New Mexico to be a sports writer at the beginning of March last year, and within 2 weeks they canceled every sporting event in the state. And so people have said, how's he like Santa Fe? I said, I don't know, he's never seen it. Because most of the time New Mexico has been locked down, and he hasn't been able to get out to really even explore this new city that he's lived in for almost a year. And then if you look at the other end of the spectrum, you have so many people who are in the last years of their life who may be widowed or alone. There's a member of my congregation who is widowed. He's in his mid-80s, perfectly healthy, but trying to find things to do. Anyway, he was being very careful with his health, and he didn't go to get a haircut for like months, until finally I said to him, Brian, I think you need to go get a haircut. And I said, how was the haircut? And he said, I realized when I got my haircut, it was the first time in 4 months I had been touched by another human being. And in our tradition, we're taught that when did the people meet God most intensely? It was at Mount Sinai, when all of the people were gathered together as one. We are a people that finds a sense of divinity in that interpersonal connection. In Jewish tradition, God is found in the nexus of community. Jews don't do anything by themselves. They don't celebrate the Sabbath by themselves or holidays by themselves. They don't mourn by themselves. They can't be sick by themselves. They can't celebrate a wedding or a birth by themselves. Everything is in the community. So the pandemic of loneliness has been really difficult just to find that basis of spiritual connection. And I think some of the things that we're doing in our community to break down those barriers have been really effective. We created what we call the Chavarim team. Chavarim in Hebrew means friends. And it's a group of people from our congregation that each have a list of people that they call every 10 days to check on them. And we've had people who have volunteered to deliver groceries to people who are shut-in. We've had people who have really risen to the occasion to try to break down those barriers of loneliness. But there's only so much that you can do, because as another member of my congregation said, I'm doing all the things you're offering, but when that program is over and I switch off the computer, it's still the same four walls. And I remember my father died and my mother remarried, and her husband said something that was just so powerful to me. He said, you know, I always had someone to do something with, but what I really missed was having someone to do nothing with. And that lack of companionship, just knowing there's another person there with you sometimes is enough that it can make you feel that spiritual boost that a lot of people are missing.
John?
Yes, I think that what both of our participants so far have spoken about is the fact that human beings are social beings. And that what is happening during the pandemic is that we are no longer able to socialize in the way in which we are used to socializing and being able to participate in those types of events. As Tony said, you know, you can only do so much Zoom. And even our church services, our synagogue services, the mosque is all on Zoom today. And you get up, roll out of bed in the morning, and instead of being socially presentable, you simply go downstairs in your pajamas or whatever, and you sit in front of your Zoom to be able to look at the worship services. It totally contrasts to the type of social action of getting ready to go out, to prepare, to be able to see friends, be a part of that community, which is not there at the present time. So we, as human beings, certainly need social interactions to complete our own sense of fulfillment of our own humanity. Now, I think that it's also important to say that in the United States, while loneliness is certainly intensified because of COVID, it's interesting that loneliness has increased in the United States since 1985. We've been on a process of being more and more of a lonely nation of peoples, and what causes that is certainly a part of the discussion that we have. But part of the reason for that is because of the internet and because of our communication, and that depending upon the internet for our communication is one of the problems that has been arising more and more each year since 1985. But of course, the COVID has simply intensified that whole situation. Loneliness can cause a lot of problems, as mentioned in the moderator's statement, and it has both the negative effects on both physical as well as emotional health. And these include boosting one's stress level, more and more stress being by oneself, altering brain functions, increasing heart problems and strokes. How many people have we heard recently who've had a stroke or having heart problems? And how does that relate to the COVID situation? Triggering depression, and certainly the rise of suicide amongst younger people. We only have to think about Congressman Raskin and that horrid situation that he's just faced with the death of his young son. Poor decision-making certainly is part of that type of distress and emotional health. And to only name one more, but really a tragic one, is more substance abuse, more alcohol, more drugs being used to be able to try to cope with the situation. So all part of the lack of socialization, really, of being caused by COVID.
Thank you, John. I'm sorry, Michael.
Thank you, John.
You're most welcome.
A very good discussion. I think we look at the issue of just clinical depression or clinically diagnosed depression is one thing, and it's a problem that requires medication and diagnosis and moderation in medical care. And I think there's also situational loneliness. I think that, as John points out, that loneliness has sort of increased as a problem since the mid-'80s. And I think that's just been as a gradual growth of reliance on technology. There's sort of a false sense that sometimes we have that I've got everything I need here alone myself, and we're not interdependent, all right, which is really not true. And I think the last year, certainly the members of my community have come to recognition of things they've taken for granted before in community life, where before they just, now that they can appreciate it, and they're just happy whenever they can have some sense of physical proximity. I think I come at the issue of loneliness too as someone who lives a celibate life and is promised to that. And I think I'm well aware of the difference between loneliness and solitude. And the consolation I feel at times is that I know God is always present, even if it's just for him to be there for me to complain to. And I think that's a very important prayer that we need to make at this time. I'm not minimizing that. I think also just what's very helpful, I think for us at this time is to pass through this, is to have a sense of purpose. That even though our time right now is more critically spent alone, we are not separated from each other. We may have physical distance, but we don't have to have social distance. That we have within us also, one of the things that I find very helpful is maintaining a schedule, even if I'm spending it at home, so that a schedule of prayer, a schedule of getting up, cleaning, washing, preparing for the day, dressing for the day. Even if I'm all alone and people may only see me from here up. There's something, I think, that recognizes dignity and purpose in doing those things, so that we don't just go through life passively, but there's a purpose. This too will pass, all right? And hopefully we'll have the opportunity to choose to be more grateful for the time together and for our shared purposes, to form a community, to be driven as far as towards the common good, and greater respect for each and every human person.
Thank you, Dan.
So I think what we're learning is that COVID didn't cause this pandemic of loneliness. It was there. It just exposed it. And I think what we learned over many, many years is that our connections were not authentic. And it's interesting, when we were trying to dream up things that we could do when the pandemic hit a year ago, the cantor of our congregation said, I'm going to offer a daily online Hebrew class so that people in the congregation who want to learn Hebrew, they can log on for 45 minutes with me and I'll teach them Hebrew. And what she discovered was that, yes, they were interested in learning Hebrew, but they were far more interested in connecting. Yeah. So 20 minutes of the Hebrew class is just check-in. Yes. It's just talking. And these people have built, who have never met each other in person, have built an incredibly important circle of friendship and meaning and connection. Oh, and by the way, they did learn a little Hebrew. And I think that really a testament to something, which is that we need to make the alleviating of loneliness a priority. We need to really focus on using technology for all of its wonderful tools. It's not the technology that's the problem, it's our orientation that's our problem. If we can make it a priority to have real engagement, real sharing, real connection, then actually the technology can be a catalyst and a facilitator of building even deeper connections of community.
I agree with you. I agree with you entirely. I hear some of the people say, well, I can't wait till we get rid of Zoom. And I'm like, oh, it's here to stay. And what we've learned is that it can be used as a great ancillary tool to religious formation, education, checking in, and can never replace the sense of physical proximity, but it can certainly assist us in our community and communion life.
Thanks. Let's go to a break.
We hope you are enjoying today's program. If you would like to learn more about the American Religious Town Hall, please visit our website at americanreligious.org. That's americanreligious.org. There you can read about the mission and history of the program, learn about the Town Hall estates, and view past programs by clicking the appropriate menu buttons. Each week, Pastor Lutz looks forward to receiving your letters. You may write to him at the address shown on your screen. Send your letters to Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. That's Pastor Jerry Lutz, American Religious Town Hall Meeting, P.O. Box 180118, Dallas, Texas 75218. Thank you for writing, and thank you for watching. And now, back to you and today's closing statements.
Welcome back, and thank you to our sponsors. And we appreciate so much the opportunity to visit with these distinguished folk that have so much for us to think about, and we really appreciate that. Why don't we sum up today, and we'll begin with you again, Michael.
Well, I think the period of pandemic has exposed and exacerbated issues of loneliness, but also it has led us to new remedies, new tools by which we can become connected and foster a connection that we already have. I think that if we pray each day for gratitude, it will help us to understand that there's a purpose to our lives lived currently, and our lives that will be lived again after this pandemic.
I'm going to pick up on what Michael said, and I think it was a really important point that came out at the end of our discussion today. I think that if churches, for example, if we can't wait to go off Zoom, we've lost the plot. I think that as a result of this, this type of communication with our parishioners, and broader community is going to play an equally important role even when people are able to go back for services, for example, and that it's becoming so well refined that Zoom will be a really important phenomenon later on when certainly the pandemic is over, but will still be used as a very important tool for being able to communicate. So I wanted to be able to say that because I think that it's easy to bash technology, it's easy to bash the computer, et cetera. But I think that the pandemic has opened up for us brand new ways of being able to communicate and to be able to reach people that were not reachable before. I think it's important to, now during the pandemic, my wife, who will be listening to this program, will just die when she hears me say this. But each day we take a walk. And at the bottom of our hill that we live on is a post office box. So I make a point to walk down every day to be able to mail the letters that have accumulated during the day to be able to mail. And it's an hour, it's a mile both round trip, so it's a nice way to be able to get out of the house. And for people to be able to find these types of ways of being able to get out, you don't see people, you wear your mask, and you are getting exercise as well. And when you get back home, you feel different. And so that's just one of the hints that is important. But also, you're not alone in this. You're not alone. Everyone is in the same ship, so to say. And it is certainly, loneliness is a feeling only the person experiencing it can truly identify. I can't identify your loneliness. It's only when the individual knows when one is lonely in contrast to other emotional feelings you might be having.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, Kent and John mentioned something that I have in my closing remarks about walking outside. I think that's very important to just get out and enjoy nature. Also, staying busy. There's a lot of opportunities for people to assist others with food pantries, and there's a lot of different challenges that we're experiencing. Of course, in the Dallas area, we've had this winter storm that was awful. There's a lot of opportunities to help people, and I think when you help people, it helps with loneliness. I think one thing that we probably can talk about on this program or another one is the whole fear factor. I think fear is a big contributor, because if you're afraid to get out and be around people, you're going to stay isolated, and that's a thing that we probably can talk about.
Sure. Dan?
So unfortunately, my mother-in-law passed away during the pandemic back in August, and we were not able to go to Chicago to be there with our family to observe the funeral or to mourn or to, in Jewish tradition, there's a week-long period called Shiva, where the community typically goes to the mourner's house to offer comfort and presence, and we couldn't do any of that. I attended the funeral from the couch in our living room. And what we learned from that experience, though, was that it was incumbent upon us to reach out more deliberately to connect. And so now we regularly have what we call the family Zoom, where her cousins and the family get together on a regular basis just to talk and to see each other. That would have been a good thing to do before the pandemic. A lot of the things that we're learning to do are things that can transcend this particular moment. And I think it sort of calls on us to really do our work in community, which means look for the lonely people and reach out to them. Look for the vulnerable people. And when you connect with people, make it an authentic connection. Make it a real connection. Don't just ask, how are you? Have a meaningful, open, and true dialogue with that person, because that will alleviate the loneliness far more than just being there to give someone a warm embrace.
Thank you, guys. You know, I have a church that has over 1,000 regular attenders, and yet what a blessing it is to come here and meet with you guys, because we actually get to meet in person and visit. And so I just want to be grateful for every opportunity to connect and get outside of our little circles, because our little circles can become a little bit stagnant. The charter of the American Religious Town Hall provides that Roman Catholics, Protestants, Jews, educators, and others may appear on this program and can declare their beliefs without hesitancy. And the rest of the members of the panel will uphold and guarantee that American right to all who will appear, irrespective of race or creed, so that the rest of the world can see that here in America, we believe in civil and religious freedom, not only in theory, but in reality. And now, friends, until next week at the same time and over the very same channel, the American Religious Town Hall meeting stands adjourned. May the God of all of us bless all of you.